During the live television broadcast, the atmosphere was already filled with anticipation. The host had gathered a panel of voices meant to stir conversation, challenge ideas, and give the audience something memorable to take away. Among the panelists was Donald Trump, a figure who never shied away from blunt statements, no matter how controversial they might be. Viewers at home expected him to be outspoken, but few anticipated how quickly he would set the tone for the night. Asterisk as the discussion turned toward presidential legacies, the moderator asked Trump about his thoughts on past administrations and how they had influenced the current political landscape. Without hesitation, Trump leaned slightly back in his chair, adjusted his tie, and delivered a statement that made the entire studio fall silent. He referred to Barack Obama and, in his trademark fashion, brushed aside any nuance or careful wording. His remark was direct, unfiltered, and cutting. Obama was dumb. Asterisk, the power of live television is that words, once spoken, cannot be taken back. There was no editing, no pause button, no chance to reshape the phrasing. The audience, both in the studio and at home, heard the insult exactly as it was intended, simple, raw, and dismissive. For some viewers, the comment fit into what they had come to expect from Trump, a man who had built a reputation on brashness and unpolished honesty. For others, it was more than just another insult. It was a targeted dismissal of a president who had not only left an indelible mark on American politics, but also remained a figure of pride for millions. Asterisk. The studio's energy shifted immediately. A few panelists shifted in their seats, clearly uneasy, while others looked down at their notes, perhaps avoiding eye contact in anticipation of what might follow. The host's eyebrows raised, signaling surprise even from someone accustomed. Two heated exchanges. The camera panned to the audience briefly, catching a mixture of stunned silence and nervous laughter. It was the kind of comment that everyone knew would dominate headlines, clips, and social media for days to come. Asterisk, Trump's choice of the word dumb carried weight precisely because of its simplicity. It wasn't a policy critique, nor was it a detailed argument about Obama's decisions. It was the type of playground insult that cut directly to the heart, dismissing intellect and leadership in one quick jab. Coming from a former president himself, the insult felt even more jarring. This wasn't a political analyst offering critique. It was someone who had occupied the very same office, minimizing the accomplishments of his predecessor in the bluntest terms possible. Asterisk, the remark echoed through the studio in more ways than one. There was no immediate follow-up from Trump, no elaboration. He seemed content to let the word hang in the air, as though it alone was enough to carry his point. The silence that followed was telling. In live debates, moments like these can feel stretched, each second heavier than the last, as everyone waits for anyone to fill the gap. The producers in the control room likely exchanged glances, recognizing that the clip was already television gold. Asterisk for many watching at home. The insult resonated differently depending on their own views of Obama. Supporters of the former president felt a sharp sting, a frustration that his record was being reduced to a single word. Critics of Obama, on the other hand, may have seen the remark as bold. Another example of Trump saying what others might not dare to. That polarity of reaction was part of Trump's calculated style. He knew his words would divide, but he also knew division drew attention. Asterisk yet, in the context of this particular setting, the insult did more than just spark reactions. It created an opening, a gap in the conversation that begged for a response. In a room filled with voices, someone was bound to step in and address it. The insult wasn't just an attack on Obama. It was also a challenge to everyone present. Would they let the statement stand unchallenged, or would someone counter it with facts, perspective, or a defense of the legacy under fire? Asterisk at that moment, Trump sat with an air of satisfaction, as though he had delivered exactly the kind of line that would ripple across headlines. The cameras captured him with a faint smirk, his body language relaxed, almost daring anyone to dispute him. It was the kind of remark that crystallized the atmospheric tense, charged, and waiting for the next move. Asterisk. As the weight of Trump's remarks settled over the studio, the silence that followed felt almost louder than his words. The audience wasn't sure what would come next, and even the moderator hesitated, clearly aware that this was the kind of moment that could define the entire segment. That was when Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett shifted slightly in her chair, leaning forward with a quiet determination that immediately drew attention. She didn't interrupt in a rush or speak over anyone. Instead, she waited for the pause to settle completely, and then her voice entered the conversation with calm authority. Asterisk Crockett had built her reputation on being sharp, measured, and unafraid to confront difficult statements, but in this moment, it was the way she carried herself that made the difference. She didn't look angry, nor did she appear flustered. Instead, she kept her composure, as though she had been waiting for precisely this kind of challenge. With her eyes fixed firmly in Trump's direction, she began to speak. Asterisk Mr. Trump, she said evenly, I think it's important to remember what leadership actually looks like. Her tone wasn't sharp, it was steady, the kind of tone that carries more weight because it doesn't rely on volume. She began outlining Barack Obama's presidency, not in vague terms, but with specifics. She reminded the panel and the audience that Obama stepped into office at one of the darkest economic moments in modern history. The financial crisis had left millions of Americans fearing for their jobs, their homes, and their future. Yet within the first years of his administration, the economy had begun to stabilize. Unemployment rates, which had soared, were gradually pushed downward. She moved from economics to healthcare, pointing out that, whether one agreed with the Affordable Care Act or not, its impact was undeniable. Millions of Americans who previously had no access to health coverage were suddenly able to see doctors, receive prescriptions, and get medical care without the fear of financial ruin. Crockett didn't frame it as perfection. She acknowledged that debates about the law still continue, but she emphasized that creating such sweeping reform required intellect, vision, and a deep concern for ordinary people. As she spoke, the audience began to respond. At first there were quiet murmurs, nods of recognition from those who remembered the details she was recounting. Then, as she layered her points with clarity, the energy in the room began to shift. She wasn't yelling, she wasn't attacking, and she wasn't falling into the trap of trading insults. She was reframing the moment entirely, showing that facts could speak louder than dismissive words. Crockett's ability to stay focused on results, rather than personalities, made her intervention stand out. She didn't once try to mirror Trump's language. Instead, she elevated the conversation, contrasting the blunt insult with a calm recitation of achievements that could not be ignored. When she said, "That is not the record of someone dumb," her words landed with precision. She let the evidence do the work, piece by piece building a case that painted a very different picture of Obama than the one Trump had offered just moments earlier. The contrast between their approaches was stark. Trump had delivered a single jab, leaning on the power of bluntness to get attention. Crockett, on the other hand, took that very moment of attention and redirected it, offering a counter-narrative that reminded the audience of history, policy, and impact. She showed how the legacies of leaders can't be reduced to one-word dismissals, and she did so without ever raising her voice. Trump, sitting just a few feet away, listened as she spoke. His usual tendency to interrupt or counter was absent, at least for those minutes. As Crockett continued, she filled the silence he had left with substance, turning what could have been an unchecked insult into a discussion about measurable achievements. The audience, sensing the balance shift, began clapping, at first sporadically, then with growing energy. Crockett finished her response with a final note that cut to the heart of the matter. "What's really dumb is dismissing results simply because you don't like the man who achieved them." Her delivery was steady, but the words carried an edge that could not be missed. It wasn't personal. She hadn't resorted to name-calling or insults, but it was firm, a direct pushback that exposed the weakness in Trump's comment. In that moment, she had done more than respond to an insult. She had reminded the audience, both in the studio and watching from home, that words matter, and so do facts. By calmly and firmly laying out the record, she had transformed what began as a dismissive remark into an opportunity to highlight accomplishment and resilience. The applause that followed wasn't just for her sharpness, it was for the clarity she brought into a moment clouded by a single word. What stood out most about Jasmine Crockett's reply was the way she framed her response. In a setting where tempers often flare and exchanges can quickly spiral into personal attacks, she made the deliberate choice to rise above that. Trump had offered a comment designed to provoke, a remark that stripped away nuance and aimed for shock value. Instead of meeting him at the same level, Crockett approached the moment with discipline and precision, shifting the entire conversation from personalities to substance. Her strategy became clear the moment she chose not to insult him back. Viewers had seen countless political debates where sharp words lead to shouting matches, and in those situations, the audience often walks away remembering the conflict more than the content. Crockett, however, refused to get pulled into that trap. She didn't mirror Trump's language, didn't label him, and didn't try to cut him down with a similar jab. Instead, she rooted her response in facts, pulling the focus back to the larger picture of leadership and measurable results. By emphasizing Obama's record economic recovery, unemployment reduction, and healthcare expansion, she not only countered the insult, but also reminded the audience of tangible achievements. This wasn't abstract praise. It was grounded in specifics that were difficult to dismiss. The contrast between Trump's single word and Crockett's detailed recollection of accomplishments made his comment feel hollow in comparison. Every point she laid out created a narrative that was larger than the insult itself, showing that a leader's worth can't be defined by one dismissive adjective. The way she framed her remarks also highlighted another key element: restraint. In politics, restraint can sometimes be more powerful than aggression. Crockett demonstrated that by keeping her tone measured, refusing to sound defensive or emotional. She spoke with the confidence of someone who knew her facts would carry more weight than volume. Her calm delivery made the audience lean in rather than recoil, and that quiet authority made her words resonate even more. Trump's presence on the stage added another layer to the moment. He is known for his ability to dominate conversations, often interrupting or speaking over others to maintain control of the room. Yet when Crockett began her response, she didn't allow that dynamic to take hold. By maintaining her pace and refusing to be rushed or derailed, she effectively set the terms of the exchange. It was as if she was saying, "You can throw out a jab, but I will decide how the discussion unfolds." That shift in control was subtle but unmistakable. Another element of her framing was the way she spoke to the audience as much as to Trump. She wasn't just countering his insult. For his benefits, she was offering viewers at home a reminder of history. Many people watching remembered the financial crisis, the healthcare debates, and the policies that shaped that era. By bringing those memories to the forefront, she reconnected the insult to lived experiences. It wasn't just about defending Obama. It was about grounding the conversation in what ordinary Americans had seen and felt during his presidency. This approach also exposed a weakness in Trump's style. His reliance on blunt, provocative language often works in environments where no one challenges him with details. But when Crockett chose to build her response around specifics, she created a contrast that highlighted the emptiness of the insult. It showed that while quick remarks may grab attention, they don't always stand up against fact-based pushback. Her ability to maintain focus on results turned what might have been just another round of name-calling into a moment of clarity. What made the exchange even more striking was the way Crockett ended her point. She framed the real issue not as whether Obama was dumb, but as whether dismissing proven results out of dislike made any sense at all. That shift in framing not only defended Obama, but also forced the audience to question the logic behind Trump's comment. By placing the focus on results versus personal grudges, she reframed the entire conversation into one about fairness and credibility. In politics, framing is everything. It determines how an audience interprets what they've just heard. Crockett's decision to elevate the moment rather than descend into insults reshaped the dynamic in the studio. Trump had entered the exchange with a soundbite designed to dominate the headlines, but she turned it into a lesson in how composure and facts can cut through noise. It wasn't just that she responded, it was the way she chose to do it that left the deepest impression. The aftermath of the exchange revealed just how powerful Jasmine Crockett's words had been. As her response landed, the energy in the studio shifted dramatically. The audience, which had been caught off guard by Trump's blunt insult, now found itself leaning toward Crockett's side. The applause started with a few scattered claps, but within seconds it built into steady approval. A clear signal that her calm yet sharp defense had resonated. The applause wasn't just for her delivery, it was for the way she had managed to redirect the entire conversation. Trump, sitting only a few feet away, didn't offer the kind of immediate comeback that people had come to expect from him. Normally, he thrives on back-and-forth exchanges, cutting in with interruptions, or escalating with sharper remarks. This time, however, Crockett's framing left little room for a quick response. Her points had been factual, her delivery controlled, and her conclusion precise. To push back to strongly risked looking defensive, and to remain silent risked looking defeated. For a man known for dominating the spotlight, the silence was noticeable. The moderator, sensing the shift, moved the conversation along, but the highlight of the night had already been cemented. Crockett had done what few managed to do in live settings. She had taken control of the narrative. Trump's original insult was meant to be the headline, a provocative soundbite that would echo across news outlets. Instead, it was her reply that stole the moment, reframing the exchange from one of insult to one of substance. The audience's reaction made it clear that her approach had worked. What stood out most was the way she left Trump without an easy path forward. If he attempted to double down, he would risk looking petty compared to her measured defense. If he ignored her points, it would seem as though he had no answer to the facts she laid out. This rare pause in his usual rhythm showed how effectively she had cornered the conversation. His typical strategy leaning on quick comebacks and shifting attention didn't serve him here because Crockett had anchored the moment in details and results rather than emotion. For viewers at home, the visual contrast was striking. On one side of the table sat Trump, who had just moments earlier delivered a cutting remark with the kind of confidence that usually kept him in control. On the other side sat Crockett, composed and unwavering, who dismantled that remark without raising her voice. The cameras caught every reaction, from her steady expression to his silence, and the audience at home could see exactly where the momentum had shifted. The reaction outside the studio mirrored what had unfolded live. Clips of Crockett's response spread quickly across social media, often paired with captions pointing out how effectively she had silenced Trump's jab. The moment became less about the insult itself and more about the way it had been answered. People weren't just sharing the exchange because of what was said, but because of how it unfolded, a demonstration of how composure and facts can neutralize provocation. The outcome also reinforced something deeper about the dynamics of public debate. Trump's style relies heavily on controlling the tone, forcing opponents to play on his terms by reacting emotionally. Crockett's success came from refusing to play that game. By staying calm and keeping the focus on results, she shifted the rules of engagement, leaving him without a script to follow. That ability to change the tempo of a conversation is rare, especially in the high-pressure environment of live television, and it explained why her response had such an immediate and lasting impact. Asterisk inside the studio. Even the other panelists seemed to recognize that a line had been drawn. Some leaned back in their seats, nodding in quiet agreement, while others glanced at Trump, perhaps waiting for him to reclaim control of the conversation. But the moment passed, and he didn't. Crockett had seized it, and once she did, there was no taking it back. Asterisk the audience's applause was the final confirmation of the shift. In settings like these, live feedback matters. It shapes how both participants and viewers interpret the exchange. The applause wasn't explosive or chaotic. It was steady and strong, the kind of response that made clear where the room stood. It left Trump sitting in silence, unable to match her composure, and it left Crockett as the undeniable voice of the segment. Asterisk what began as a single-word insult, meant to dominate the stage, ended in a reminder of how easily control can change. Hence, Trump had set the spark, but it was Crockett who turned it into a defining moment. One where substance triumphed over soundbite and calm authority left the louder voice without reply. Asterisk. As the cameras continued rolling, and the discussion eventually shifted to other topics, it was clear to everyone watching that the defining moment of the broadcast had already taken place. What began as a simple insult from Trump had turned into a showcase of composure, facts, and control, thanks to Jasmine Crockett's intervention. The audience didn't walk away remembering the word dumb. Instead, they carried with them the sharpness of her response, the steady way she delivered it, and the way the studio erupted in support afterward. Asterisk moments like these highlight the difference between speaking to be heard and speaking to make an impact. Trump's comment was designed to provoke, and in many settings it might have succeeded. But Crockett's decision to keep her cool and ground her response in measurable results demonstrated something far more powerful. She showed that leadership isn't about volume or the sharpness of an insult. It's about clarity, perspective, and the ability to rise above distractions. Asterisk the lasting image of that exchange was not Trump leaning back with a smirk after his remark. It was Crockett leaning forward, calmly dissecting the insult and turning it into an opportunity to remind everyone of what leadership had actually looked like under Obama's administration. That shift is what people remembered, and it's why her words spread so quickly beyond the studio walls. Asterisk for Trump, the silence that followed was unusual. He has built a reputation on dominating the spotlight and never backing down. Yet in this instance, he was left without a retort. It wasn't because he lacked words, it was because Crockett had framed the moment in such a way that anything he said would only make the contrast more obvious. Her facts against his insult created an imbalance that couldn't easily be undone. Asterisk for Crockett. The outcome reinforced her growing reputation as a voice unafraid to stand firm in difficult moments. She didn't need to shout to be heard. She didn't need to trade barbs to make a point. Instead, she demonstrated that a well-timed, well-framed response can carry more weight than a dozen insults. In doing so, she reminded the audience and Trump himself that sometimes the most powerful way to win a moment is simply to refuse to play the game as it's presented. Asterisk. By the time the segment ended, the story had already been written in the minds of viewers. Trump had tried to define the exchange with a single word, but Crockett had redefined it with her calm precision. The applause, the silence, and the viral response afterward all pointed to the same conclusion. She had not only defended Obama's legacy, but also shown what it looks like to meet provocation with poise. Asterisk in the end. This wasn't just about one insult or one response. It was about how leadership is displayed in real time, under pressure, when the cameras are rolling and the world is watching. Crockett showed that composure and truth can outlast the loudest voice in the room. And, for many who watched, that was the